Welcome in. Ever feel like you open one textbook or article about society and suddenly, bam, you're down this rabbit hole of like a million theories?
Oh, tell me about it. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose sometimes, right?
Exactly. So, today is a deep dive. We're tossing you a life preserver. We're going to chart these like exciting but kind of murky waters of modern social psychology and our trusty guide, that excerpt you all sent over.
Always love a good deep dive. Should be interesting to see where this one takes us.
Right. And get this, we're not just talking about those, dusty old lab experiments.
Please, no more mazes with rats. I've had enough of those in my years of research.
There, yeah. But no, this is different. We're diving into how social psych is tackling like real world, hold on to your hats issues.
It's true, the field has really exploded in how it's being applied. And what's fascinating is that it's going beyond just describing what's happening. It's more about figuring out how to change things, make a real difference.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. So it's not just about what we already know, instinctively about people. It's about going deeper. Like you mentioned this whole population psychology thing, which I gotta admit sounds kind of intimidating.
It does sound a bit intense, doesn't
It's
it?
just a tad.
But it's actually a perfect example of what we're talking about. You know that old saying, more people, more problems?
Oh, yeah. Definitely rings true these days.
Turns out there's an entire area of research dedicated to that very idea.
Wait, really? Like how many slices of pizza you need when your friends invite their entire dorm over, that kind of thing?
Well, there's that, but on a much, much larger scale.
Mm.
Imagine trying to predict things like, I don't know, resource use, housing demands, even how social systems hold up under that kind of pressure.
Hmm.
It's about understanding not just the numbers, but how people's attitudes and behaviors play a role.
Okay, so less about pizza logistics, more about the psychology of like a whole planet full of people.
You got it.
I'm starting to see why this deep dive was requested.
Exactly. And the best part, it's not all doom and gloom. Researchers are using these insights to find ways to encourage, more sustainable behaviors. And even policies.
See, now that's what I call applied knowledge. But we're not just our zip codes and global citizenship, right? There's that whole personal level where social psych comes into play. And I think a good place to start there is with this thing that never seems to go away, stress.
Ah, stress. The silent killer, as they say. What's fascinating here is how intertwined our mental and physical states really are. Your excerpt mentioned something I found really interesting, how chronic stress can be as bad for your heart as, get this, smoking.
Whoa, hold up. Stress is one thing, but that's a whole other level. I'm definitely guilty of underestimating how much, like, my brain impacts the rest of my body.
It's a common misconception. Health psychology really delves into this whole mind-body connection deeply. For instance, did you know that having a strong support system, friends, family, even a therapist, can actually boost your immune response?
Wait, seriously? So, venting to my best friend isn't just good for my sanity, it's good for my health. Sign me up.
It's true. And it's not just about, having someone to listen to your complaints. It's about feeling connected, supported, understood. It's like a buffer against stress that has tangible physical benefits.
Okay, that is seriously cool. But let's talk about another type of environment that impacts us like every single day,
Yeah.
our workplaces. This section on industrial organizational psychology really jumped out at me.
It's a fascinating area, especially now when so much about work is changing. This field really looks at how people function in those settings, from, motivation and teamwork to, yes, even the dreaded open office plan.
Oh, don't even get me started on open offices. But seriously, what I find interesting is that this isn't just about making bosses happy with like more productivity. It's about actually improving things for, us regular employees too.
Absolutely. One of the key takeaways here is that when people feel heard, valued, and empowered in their work, productivity naturally increases. It's a win-win. There was a fascinating study mentioned in the material you provided. It found that companies that, get this, encourage their employees to give input in decision-making, actually listen to their ideas, they saw a huge drop in people calling out sick because of stress.
Wow, really? Just from feeling like their voices were heard.
Yeah, it's like they felt more ownership, more control, and that led to a much healthier work environment for everyone involved.
So it's not just about beanbag chairs and like free snacks in the break room. It's about creating a culture where people actually feel valued for their contributions. I'm starting to think this whole social psychology thing should be required learning for, well, everyone.
Right. It's about understanding each other better, right? Okay, but let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about a field where understanding how people tick is absolutely critical, the legal system.
Ooh, getting serious now.
Well, it's some seriously interesting stuff. Forensic psychology, it's having a major moment right now. And your excerpt, it really dives into some like eye-opening concepts about, the intersection of psychology and the law.
Okay, this was the part I was most curious about, especially that whole section on eyewitness testimony.
Ah, yes. The reliability of memory, or sometimes the lack thereof. Always a fascinating topic.
Right. I mean, we've all seen those true crime documentaries, right? Where you have one person swearing they saw something and then someone else remembers it totally differently. It makes you wonder how much of what we think we remember is actually accurate.
Exactly. Our memories, they're not these perfect recordings that we sometimes think they are.
Mm.
They can be incredibly fuzzy, influenced by all sorts of things. Stress, biases, even just the way a question is phrased.
You're kidding. Just the way someone words something can change what we remember.
It's true. The excerpt mentioned this one study where they had people watch a video of a car accident, right?
Oh.
Simple enough. But then they changed the verb they used when asking about the speed. Like they'd say smashed versus contacted.
Okay, yeah, and.
And just changing that one word,
Yeah.
it actually influenced how fast people remembered those cars going. Wild, right?
Whoa, that is wild. So just a single word can, like, change someone's entire recollection of an event. That's kind of terrifying when you think about how much weight is given to eyewitness accounts in courtrooms.
Well, absolutely. And that's exactly why forensic psychology is so crucial. It's like it's helping legal professionals, lawyers, judges, even juries, understand the limits of human memory, how powerful suggestion can be,
Yeah.
and, hopefully helping them to gather evidence and, like, structure their cases in a way that minimizes those cognitive biases we all have.
So it's not just about trying to, get a confession or trip someone up on the stand.
No, not at all. Well, sometimes, maybe. But the bigger picture here is about justice, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that the right decisions are being made based on the most accurate information possible.
I'm starting to see why this field is getting so much attention these days. It's like a real-life detective story. But instead of, like, dusting for fingerprints, they're unraveling the mysteries of the human mind.
Exactly.
And speaking of how our minds work, we can't forget about this whole cognitive revolution that's been shaking things up in the world of social psychology.
Right. This is where social psychology gets really meta, because
Uh-huh.
now we're talking about understanding the thoughts, beliefs, and mental processes that, drive all those behaviors we observe in social settings.
So it's like social psychology is becoming even more social by going deeper into how we think and, like, process the world around us.
You could say that, yeah.
So tell me more. How does this actually play out in research? What are they looking at specifically?
Well, one of the biggest shifts has been this move away from simply observing outward behavior, just watching what people do. Now, it's about actually trying to get inside their heads and study the mental processes that are happening beneath the surface.
Okay, so less about what people do, more about why they do it.
Exactly.
Right.
We're talking about things like attention, memory, how we form impressions of other people, those snap judgments we all make, even how we make decisions when we're in social situations, like surrounded by other people.
That is fascinating. So not just about what people do, but, like, why they do it based on how they're processing information. It's like social psychology is this incredible blend of, like, sociology, but also cognitive science all rolled into one.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
one of the most important things this whole cognitive revolution has highlighted, it's the crucial role of culture in everything, like in shaping our thoughts, our behaviors, how we see the world. It's not this, one-size-fits-all situation. Our upbringing, our values, our beliefs, those cultural lenses we see the world through, those have a huge impact on how we interpret those social cues, how we interact with others.
That makes perfect sense. We can't just assume that, like, what might be considered polite in one culture is automatically going to fly somewhere else, right?
Precisely. And this multicultural perspective, it's really enriched the field. It's challenging those old assumptions and really pushing researchers to consider a way wider range of experiences and perspectives.
It's like social psychology is becoming this, like, incredible tapestry. It's weaving together all these different threads, individual minds, cultural influences, and, get this, even our evolutionary history. Which actually brings us to another really cool point in this excerpt, that whole nature versus nurture debate. I gotta admit, I still get those two mixed up sometimes.
Oh, don't worry, you're not alone. It's a question that's been puzzling scholars for centuries, Nature versus nurture. It's the ultimate debate. And your excerpt here, it touches on a really interesting angle, this field of evolutionary psychology. Have you ever wondered, like, why certain social behaviors like altruism or even aggression Why those seem to be so universal?
Across.
Cultures, I mean.
I have. It's always made me wonder, like, is some of that hardwired into us as humans, even if it, shows up in different ways depending on where you're from? Like, maybe we're all programmed to be, like, cooperative to a certain extent just because it helped our ancestors survive way back when.
That's exactly the kind of question evolutionary psychology is trying to answer. It suggests that some of our social behaviors might be, literally rooted in our genes. Like, think about it. Certain traits might have provided an evolutionary advantage way back when, making our ancestors more likely to survive, to reproduce, and pass those traits down.
So you're saying things like cooperation, competition, even our sense of what's fair or not, those could all have roots that go all the way back to, like, the dawn of humanity.
It might sound crazy, but that's what the research is suggesting.
That is mind-blowing.
Right. But it's important to remember, evolutionary psychology isn't saying that our genes dictate everything. It's not like we're, robots completely controlled by our DNA. It's more about predispositions, tendencies that then interact with our environment, our individual experiences, all of that.
So it's not really nature versus nurture, but more like nature and nurture,
Yeah.
right? They work together. Like we might have a genetic predisposition towards a certain temperament, but then how that temperament actually gets expressed, how it plays out in our lives, that's influenced by our upbringing, our social interactions, all those environmental factors, right?
Yeah, it's a super complex interplay. And social psychology is trying to untangle it all, to understand how all those different threads weave together to make us who we are.
It's like we're trying to solve this giant jigsaw puzzle, but instead of some, static picture, we're actually trying to piece together this like ever-evolving story of, well, human behavior. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what makes social psychology so captivating. It's about understanding like who we are
Yeah.
and where we fit into this whole grand scheme of things, but also, realizing that there's always more to learn. We're never really done figuring it all out.
It really makes you appreciate how much, like, our social world, whether it's our personal relationships or, like, society as a whole, how much all of that really impacts who we become. Like, I'd never really considered how much my own background, my culture shapes how I see things, until we started this deep dive.
It's eye-opening, isn't it? It's like someone just handed you a new pair of glasses,
Yeah.
and it makes you realize how important empathy is. Understanding, really trying to see where other people are coming from, especially in a world that feels, well, increasingly divided these days.
For sure. Which
Yeah.
is interesting because learning about all this stuff, all these factors that influence why people act the way they do, it actually makes me feel a little more hopeful. Like maybe if we all understood this stuff a little better, we'd be better at bridging those divides you're talking about.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, right? The more we learn about the forces that shape our own behavior and the behaviors of those around us, the better equipped we are to actually connect with each other in meaningful ways.
100%. It's like social psychology is giving us the tools to not only understand the world around us, but to maybe like create some positive change, right? Within ourselves and our communities. So as we like start to wrap up this deep dive here, what's one like big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with today?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about how social psychology is moving beyond those, sterile lab settings and really trying to grapple with real-world problems, like
Mhm.
everything from climate change to trying to make those workplaces we talked about a little less soul-crushing.
Right. Less about cubicles, more about connections.
Exactly. But, I think the most important takeaway here, it all comes back to empathy and self-awareness,
Yeah.
really understanding what makes us tick. So when we take the time to understand all those forces that shape how we see the world, our own personal quirks, our cultural influences, even those evolutionary predispositions we talked about, we gain some really valuable insight into this whole human experience thing. We can start to see the world through multiple lenses, appreciate how complex those social interactions really are,
Mhm.
and hopefully recognize that shared humanity that, ultimately binds us all together.
I love that. It's like, yeah, social psychology might be this whole scientific field, but at its core, it's really about getting to know ourselves and our connections with each other a little bit better.
Exactly.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just remember that it's really just a starting point, right? There's always more to explore, more to learn.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the amazing world of social psychology. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those connections
Thanks for watching.
strong.
If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Your support helps us keep creating valuable content like this. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community for more insights into psychology and personal development. Let's grow and learn together. See you in the next video.